Hey guys, Zack Mars here, and this is my review of Trollhunters Tales of Arcadia. Okay, so this episode, KanjigAAARRRGGHH, is, well, it's exactly about that. So, essentially, this is the episode where Ark comes back, and with that comes some interesting, well, with that, they're finally able to rescue Jim from the Darklands, because that winds up being an important part to open Killahead Bridge. So, yeah, and of course, the episode proceeds to open up with Toby using a glamour mask to try and sneak into Vendal's workshop and underneath the Hearthstone so he can steal Vendal's staff while he's not there. And he winds up using the glamour mask, disguises himself as Vendal, and obviously pretends to be Vendal, but isn't very good at that because obviously Vendal and Toby are, this is a limitation of the glamour mask, but Vendal and Toby are very different people. And so it's very obvious, it should be obvious, but we'll get to that. But yeah, it's very obvious that Toby is not a good job, doing a very good job of playing Vendal. So of course people immediately pick up on the fact that of course Toby sneaks in pretending to be Vendal. Two guards see him at first, but then realize it's Vendal and that it's fine. And Toby of course plays it off that he's just coming in to get his staff because he forgot it. But and of course he goes up to it, and of course Toby is very, well, clumsy, so he's having a difficulty climbing the stairs and all the other things that should have given him away, but the guards couldn't be any more oblivious. But in any case, eventually Toby scoops up the staff, utters an awesome sauce under his breath, but then realizes they can hear him, so he corrects himself, and it's by saying splendid, something that Vendal is known to say. But it's at this point where the real Vendal comes in, obviously understands that there's an imposter in his workshop, and admits that he doesn't know who exactly it is that's trying to steal his stuff, but orders that the two of them get that the two guards stop them because it's obviously an imposter. But Toby, of course, then proceeds to play off the fact that he's not the imposter and that the real Vendal is actually an imposter, claiming that if he were the imposter, why would he be holding the staff? And this, of course, confuses the guards who think that the real Vendal is a fake Vendal, and they proceed to wrestle him to the ground and try to detain him long enough for Toby to sneak off with the staff. At which point they then proceed to, with the staff now in hand, they then proceed to go and meet with Otto underneath the bridge outside of Hearthstone Troll Market at night. And it's this point where they obviously start waiting for them, and they do wonder if Otto will be true to his word and he'll actually give them what they need. But they also point out that they don't really have much of a choice, and all they can really do is hope. So with that, and eventually, of course, Otto does eventually show up after he finds out that they got him the staff. But is this point where Toby decides to take the lead, pointing out that he's seen enough spy movies and other such films to know how handoffs work. Which of course he points out that he knows exactly what to do when to make the switch and what to say and all these other things. And sure enough, eventually the Janus Order pulls up in their cars. Otto eventually gets out of one of them. And it's at this point where Toby does in fact take the lead, but of course which winds up becoming a very hilarious scene, because Toby instructs Otto not to take another step further, and to throw them the recipe, and he'll throw him the cure, and they'll throw him the staff, and of course Otto is visibly annoyed at this, because here's the thing. The cure for Creeper's son is written on a piece of paper in an envelope, so obviously he can't throw it. And of course the episode makes a very obvious point of that. He's like, are you serious? He's literally like, are you serious, man? This is a really dumb idea. And of course he does entertain Toby a bit by failing to throw the envelope, but obviously it's not working out. So eventually Toby realizes that his whole not another step further thing isn't working, so he's like, all right, we'll meet you halfway, but no funny business, and show me your hands where I can see them. And Otto, of course, just rolls his eyes and continues to do the exchange. And he eventually instructs them that he's done with it, that he's done with the theatrics, and that they need to hand over the staff immediately, because his patience is at an end with Toby at this point, who's trying to do the whole tough guy exchange thing and it's not working. And eventually, after some struggling, because neither one wants to give up the envelope and the other doesn't want to let go of the staff, they do eventually exchange. And Toby, of course, is excited because it means they can finally get Arg back. While Otto is excited because they have a piece of Hearthstone, and he does point out that their deal is complete. While Toby opens up the envelope, but quickly discovers that it's actually a shopping list, not an actual, cure for Creeper Son. And it's at this point where Otto, of course, points out that what they're supposed to do is collect all the things on the shopping list, and instructs them that they have to boil it in oil till it burns. At which point it should work and they'll get their friend back. And with that, he then proceeds to get ready to go into the car, but discovers that the goblins have locked him out, which annoys him. And but they do eventually open the door, and he gets in, and he utters a goodbye in German before driving off with the rest of the group. And with that, they're excited. They're Blinky and Claire are excited that they can finally bring Arg back, but then also proceed to point out that there's a lot of really strange things on this list that they need to find, and that they're going to need to collect them up and bring them back to where Arg is. But also points out that they are going to need to find there is one ingredient that they should point out should be pretty easy to find. Pointing out that one of them is the tears of a man who's never been kissed. And of course, this is this point where they both look at Toby, who of course objects, claiming that he's been kissed multiple times. But and of course they point out that he's not that his Nana doesn't count. He's never officially been kissed. He has a girlfriend. I should mention. Well, maybe. I mean, Darcy. Obviously, Darcy. In between this episode and the last one, is probably still mad at him, but he's probably papered that over by now. But he's probably smoothed that over. Let's be perfectly honest. But of course, he points out. They do point out that he's never been kissed. So in any case, they do proceed to point that out. But meanwhile, Jim has been deposited back into his cell following his defeat of the Gnarlagroth. And they're obviously rough with him, and he points that out. But after several times of trying to break him, it ultimately does not work. But of course, it's at this point where Nomura is happy that he's alive, but also points out that it's very rough that he's still here in the dark. That he's still here, and obviously she's surprised he's still holding onto his hope, but. Of course, he then proceeds to point out that he's been trying to that of course he is holding out hope because he's been told that because he knows his friends are coming for him now, and that they just need to wait a bit until his friends eventually arrive and are able to get him out. And but until then, he's pointing out that eventually they'll both be able to escape. And Nomura is surprised about Jim saying that. But he points out that obviously she saved his life, so he feels like it's only fair that he would return the favor. But and of course she points out that even though he found some candy from her friends, that there's no likelihood that they will actually save him. But he does point out that he has faith in his friends and that stranger things have happened. And does proceed to point out that once they're home, they'll be able to have proper food, a hot meal, a bed, and then also sniffs himself and realizes that he definitely needs soap, and realizing just how much he took soap for granted. And after that, after assuring Nomura that they will both get out of there, he starts whistling in the Hall of the Mountain King, which of course causes Nomura to her ears to perk up. And also proceeds to ask him if he actually knows what exactly that song is. And he points out that he doesn't know what it is. He just found it catchy, especially since he knows Nomura likes to sing it, and then wonders what exactly it is. And she proceeds to explain that it's from Peer Gynt. In any case, she proceeds to explain how Peer Gynt is an opera, and that she points out that he probably wouldn't understand what it is, but Jim merely responds that they're stuck in there anyway. She might as well try to explain it to him. So at which point she then proceeds to sit down and proceeds to explain what exactly it is that she heard Peer Gynt from. And she goes on to explain that it's a very important play to her, because it was one of the first things she saw when she, first became a changeling. She was a young changeling. This was maybe in like the late 1800s, because that's when the play first, came out. But essentially, she goes on to explain the story of she goes on to explain how she was a young changeling in the human world, lost in the human world for the first time. She didn't know what to make of anything yet. And it's at this point, and as she was a young changeling, she was there for opening night of Peer Gynt, which again was in the 1800s. But she goes on to explain how the play is about a young boy named Peer Gynt who goes into a world of trolls, meets with the Troll King, and he goes on to explain to thy true self, and who cares whoever else thinks. But she also points out it's just a play. But she points out the opera is part of it. Was very moving to her, and she points out that from that point onward, it just became her personal motif. She would just sing, she would just whistle in the hall. They kept Mountain King to herself, which of course it has been a recurring thing with her across all of her appearances up until this point. It's obviously been like, she whistles that, and now we get an explanation as to why the play is important to her. So yeah. But in any case, she goes on to explain how it's just a play, and she points out that it's not really applicable to real life. And points out that she obviously doubts that she'll have faith. But Jim points out that he likes the story that she shared, and does point out that he likes that it gave her hope, and they will get out of there, and that her friends will eventually come for them, and that they just need to wait. At which point the scene then proceeds to transition back to the Hero's Forge, where our crew have assembled all of the ingredients that they need to actually revive Arg, including Astromonstrum shells, a couple of other odds and ends that are designed to be mixed into the formula. But of course the Astromonstrum shells are the obvious easy one, because they got them from Strickler's old office. Obviously they would just still be sitting on a desk somewhere, pretty easy to get. But of course, this is this point. But of course, once they've assembled all the ingredients and start mixing them together, they have Arg propped up next to the cauldron they're using. But they then proceed. Toby then realizes that it's time for the final ingredient, and he starts trying to punch himself in the face to make himself cry. But when that's obviously not working, Blinky instead proceeds to step on Toby's foot to get him to cry instead. Which of course he then proceeds to take the resulting tear and place it into the vat, but also is a little grumpy that he got his foot stepped on. But in any case, it's at this point where after Toby puts the final ingredient, a large puff of blue smoke erupts from the cauldron, and they proceed to all step away from it, but also points out that this is it, and that now Arg will finally be revived. And of course the potion then proceeds to engulf Arg's body, but also in a big cloud of smoke, but does nothing initially. And they're very confused about it. So, and of course, Toby is obviously very torn up, pointing out that was supposed to work and that Arg was supposed to come back to them. Pointing out that Arg was supposed to be crucial to saving Jim. But of course, the more logical-minded Claire and Blinky then proceed to wonder if Otto had in fact tricked them and gave them a bogus list of ingredients. But they do wonder, and of course, obviously he's a changeling, so of course he's the de facto leader of the Janus Order after Strickler's outing. So obviously he would be. So obviously he wouldn't be. You know, he's literally two-faced. So it would, well, multi-faced, I guess. Not necessarily two-faced, but he's literally two-faced. So it would make sense that he wouldn't be telling the truth. But of course they did proceed. But of course Toby proceeds to swear up and down that it should have worked, and does hug Arg's lifeless stone body for a little bit. But then it's revealed that yeah, it did work. It just took a few minutes to kick in. So eventually Arg does wind up reviving. He's alive again. It's great. He's been a stone statue for pretty much the entirety of this arc up to this point. But of course everybody's happy to see that he's alive and well. And with Blinky remarking that he thought he would never see his friend again. But it's at this point where it's revealed that something is off with Arg, and clearly something isn't right with him. And sure enough, Arg proceeds to go into a frenzy and starts attacking everything indiscriminately. And they quickly realize, and Blinky quickly realizes that he's overwhelmed by the fact that he was dead and came back, and he's clearly having struggle. He's clearly having difficulty readjusting. So they point out that they need to calm him down before he alerts all of Trollmarket to the fact that he's awake. And of course, they then proceed to pull, and of course, Droll tries to fight Arg to kind of get him to calm down, but it does not work. He just gets knocked away, and he starts trying to fight everybody in just a blind rage. Eventually he winds up cornering Toby at the door to the Hero's Forge, where Toby reassures him, telling him that's his wingman and that he's got nothing to worry about. But and eventually that does wind up getting through to Arg, who doesn't attack Toby. He attacks the door behind him, and eventually snaps out of it and realizes that he is in fact that everything's fine, and he does come to his senses, and he does embrace Toby, and they're all very happy now that Arg's kind of come to his senses and have brought Jim back and have brought Arg back, but then Arg then proceeds to wonder where Jim is, and the rest of the group proceeds to explain that Jim went into the Darklands alone so that nobody else would get hurt, and Arg immediately utters that they need to save Jim, but they were also told how they were supposed to save Jim. That they were told that reviving Arg would enable them to save Jim, and they wonder if he has any plans, pointing out that he was the key. So they're a little confused. But Arg is initially drawing a blank because obviously that's a lot of pressure for somebody who just came back from the dead. So he's obviously not entirely sure what to do at first. But then the Suit Squire immediately emerges from the center of the Hero's Forge and calls to Arg, and of course Arg is a little confused at first as well, but it's at this point where Blinky proceeds to explain that the amulet called to him while he was dead, and tells him that he's been recruited for some higher purpose, but what that purpose is ultimately something that Arg is going to have to figure out for himself. So with that, Arg proceeds to nervously walk up to the Suit Squire and sticks his hand in, and then proceeds to enter the void between worlds. And at which point he hears a voice from KanjigAAARRRGGHH pointing out that he's very lucky that he should be counting his fact that he's received a great honor, instructing him that this is the first time any outsider has been able to enter the void between worlds. Up until this point, it's been almost exclusively Trollhunters. There has not been a single outsider up until that point. And Arg is, of course, initially a little overwhelmed because he's not entirely sure what he's supposed to be doing in the void between worlds. But KanjigAAARRRGGHH reassures him, pointing out that it will all make sense and that they will absolutely save, and that he will absolutely be able to fulfill his purpose, and does instruct him that he was chosen for something greater. At which point, KanjigAAARRRGGHH proceeds to merge with Arg. At which point, Arg then proceeds to emerge from the Suit Squire, and they wonder what exactly. And of course, everybody is curious what exactly it is that happened. And Blinky then asks him if he didn't talk, if he talked to the Trollhunter Council, and if they have any advice and what they have to say. But it's at this point where they hear KanjigAAARRR's voice coming out of Arg's body. and he proceeds to explain that they did in fact convene with them, but that he is no longer Arg, and of course it's at this point where Blinky immediately goes into a kneel because he realizes that he's talking to KanjigAAARRR the Courageous, and of course this newly dubbed creature who the episode and Claire dubbed KanjigAAARRR is in fact exactly what that is. It's KanjigAAARRR's mind in Arg's body, and of course KanjigAAARRR proceeds to explain how he was created. He explains how Arg, because he was able to walk the line between life and death, explains that he was able to serve as a vessel for KanjigAAARRR so that KanjigAAARRR could aid them in their mission to save Jim. But of course Claire is confused as to what he's confused as to why. But he then proceeds to go on to explain that they needed a troll hunter to open Killahead Bridge, and so here he is. So essentially, KanjigAAARRR is just inhabiting Arg's body, so that he can give them the time they need to rescue Jim, and of course Toby is also visibly upset about the fact that his buddy is seemingly gone, and explains when he's going, and asks KanjigAAARRR when he's going to get his wingman back. But KanjigAAARRR proceeds to go on to explain that that Arg is fine. He's just sharing Arg and KanjigAAARRR currently sharing bodies, and while Arg's that they've essentially a symbiotic relationship. Obviously Arg gets some troll hunter powers in the process of this. Well, as we see a little bit later, but of course KanjigAAARRR is in full control. But although Arg is still physically present and mentally, but it explains that they do need. But now that he's come back to life, he does have a plan to actually rescue Jim. But it's at this point where Droll proceeds to realize that KanjigAAARRR and Arg has possessed Arg essentially, and is happy to finally quote unquote see his father, and they share their first hug, like officially, KanjigAAARRR is happy to finally be able to see his son, and Droll for his part pulls his father into a fierce hug for the first time, and obviously is very happy to have him now. And but also proceeds to they proceed to point out that they need to quickly get to where Killahead Bridge is so that they can open it. It's at this point where Vendel comes in with two guards and insists that he knew something fishy was going on, and instructs him to arrest everybody and find the staff. But it's at this point where KanjigAAARRR, in order to proceeds to summon daylight in order to defend them, and Vendel is visibly confused because obviously, as is everybody else who doesn't fully understand what's going on. Obviously, first and foremost, Arg is alive. When they very much saw him die, they are obviously very confused about that. But also the fact that Arg is able to summon daylight when he's not supposed to be able to is also very weird. And of course, Vendel is kind of curious as to what sort of black dark powers Arg has tapped into, that he was able to not only come back to life but wields daylight. He's very confused about that. But in any case, KanjigAAARRR proceeds to buy the group time so that they can escape, and eventually, and he also uses his creeping spider technique to enable them to sneak into Blinky's library so that they can get some supplies. And of course, Blinky is gushing all the while because he points out that he finally gets to see KanjigAAARRR do a lot of things in action again after being dead for a while. But and of course he's still dead, but But in any case, he proceeds to jump down into the hole, but instead proceeds to climb into and starts gathering up a bunch of things that are all around the library, and of course starts gathering up things without really explaining any what's going on. And he then proceeds, and of course everybody's confused as to what exactly is going on. They're not entirely sure what's happening, but of course he proceeds to explain. But of course he just proceeds to start gathering things up, and instructs Claire to open a portal to Killahead Bridge so that they can get there as quickly as possible. But And of course, Claire immediately does that, but then one of the guards wakes up and shoots an arrow that sends Claire's shadow staff through the portal that she created, as well as all the supplies most of the supplies KanjigAAARRRGGHH gathered up. Unfortunately, he winds up losing all of that, including Noam Chomsky, who he scoops up as well. So Noam Chomsky winds up getting sent through the portal by accident. But in any case, he winds up, you know, creating. But in case he then proceeds to kind of try to arrest him, but KanjigAAARRRGGH, of course, is not happy about the fact that the guard is interfering with their plans. So he proceeds to knock him out. And with that, they realize that they're going to need to go the long way and take the gyre station to get to the forest where Killhead Bridge is located. And of course they proceed to, you know, do that. They proceed to fight their way through. But of course, this Blinky points out that obviously they would go a lot smoother if KanjigAAARRRGGH would have just talked to everybody and explained what they're doing. But KanjigAAARRRGGH proceeds to go on to explain that they have very little time, and that talking would take up a lot of their valuable time that they need. Which of course he explains they don't have time. Which is why he's not talking to anybody. And of course everybody proceeds to pile into the gyre, but then proceeds to wonder what exactly. But Blinky at this point proceeds to wonder what exactly it is they're doing, and he explains that this time is of utmost importance, and that if they don't act soon, Jim will die. He proceeds to he just explains that to everybody about how Jim will ultimately die if they aren't careful. So with that, they then realize that yes, they do need to hurry up and get there as quickly as possible. But then they also point out but then Blinky also points out that there's no gyre station in the forest. At which point KanjigAAARRRGGH explains that they don't need one. At which point he just shoots it through the ceiling of the gyre station and just out into the woods. And of course, what we find out is that Noam Chomsky is arguing with the with the ice stone from Killhead Bridge, like just chittering at it, arguing with it because, you know, it's got a face. But it's just funny. But in any case, it's at this point where the gyre proceeds to crash into the woods where they find Killhead Bridge, and he proceeds, and it's at this point where he proceeds to bring everybody to the bridge, but and of course instructs them that now the time has come that they're able to actually start enacting his plan, pointing out that he's foreseen exactly how to get through to Jim and rescue him, and that if all goes well, they will have succeeded 100% in rescuing Jim, but also keeping Gunmar at bay. And he proceeds to go on to explain exactly what it is that he needs all of them to do. And of course, Claire and Toby are excited because they are more than happy to start smacking around gums. But he then proceeds to instruct them that they're not going to need their weapons for the plan that he has in store. So, and it proceeds to explain exactly what it is that he wants them to do, and proceeds to pull out a series of items to just give them further instructions. And he proceeds to give Claire a tool which she instructs will aid her in a key moment, and proceeds to instruct that's important. And of course he then proceeds to give Blinky a flare crystal, which he explains will save his life in a key moment. And he will proceed to explain that it'll save his life. And of course Blinky proceeds to become panicked when he realizes that his life is in danger. And proceeds to go on to explain how, and proceeds to ask KanjigAAARRRGGH what exactly it is that he's going on about, but he explains that there's no time, and he proceeds to move on to Toby. And Toby doesn't get anything, just advice. He's told that he is to ensure that they rescue Jim and nobody else. That is his instruction from KanjigAAARRRGGH. He's given no other instruction and nothing else. And Toby's a little disappointed that he doesn't get anything cool. And of course, Droll proceeds to wonder from his father what exactly it is that he's supposed to do. And KanjigAAARRRGGH proceeds to explain to his son that while he knows that his son is rearing for battle, that he's to remain in the forest. And of course, while Droll is disappointed at that, he proceeds to explain that his son has arguably the most important role of anybody. That he's supposed to keep a watch over Killhead Bridge and make sure Gunmar doesn't get out. His job is to stand guard over the bridge and keep everything safe. And that if something happens and his friends don't make it out after a while, that he will have to make an important choice. which of course Droll proceeds to realize is likely to destroy the bridge in case his friends don't get out. But of course everybody proceeds to point out that they don't know the way through the Darklands, and that they're not going to be able to find Jim with only the instructions that KanjigAAARRR gave them. But KanjigAAAARRR explains that while no, they have no instruction. They haven't seen the inside of the Darklands. He does explain that their companion has, and he proceeds to gesture toward Noam Chomsky, who explains that Chomsky is going to serve as the role of their guide. He is going to, as part of Team Trollhunter, he is going to guide them through the Darklands so that they can find Jim and get him out. And of course, Noam Chomsky openly objects at that, chittering very angrily about how he's not gonna. Essentially saying that he's not gonna do it because obviously he didn't want to go into the Darklands again. He obviously he lost his horn. He doesn't want to go back in. But of course, he then proceeds to go on to explain. But of course, KanjigAAARRR, at this point, where Toby then proceeds to reassure him, pointing out that if Noam Chomsky does this for them, he will buy him the Stacy Goback space station, with the Sally Goback space station, which of course causes Noam Chomsky to agree to it. But Toby also adds to everybody else that they're all going to have to chip in because that's very pricey, and he's not sure if he'll have the money by himself for it. So, but of course, with that, KanjigAAARRR then proceeds to use the Amulet of Daylight to assemble Killahead Bridge, and then proceeds to climb to the top. And everybody and of course Blinky is excited because that means they'll finally be able to fight along KanjigAAARRR. But KanjigAAARRR explains that he will not be with them. He explains that he's going to be using all of his energy, keeping the bridge open so that they can escape. And proceeds to explain that Arg will be there with him, and also slings a rope over Arg's shoulders so that Arg will have it. But he then proceeds to explain that he will give them one full rotation of the amulet and the arms on it, at which point they will have to get out. Essentially, is what he's established. They will have to escape. They have until then to escape. And of course, Claire proceeds to point out that that's all happening so fast, and they don't really know what's going on, and that they're obviously going to have to think through some things. But KanjigAAARRR explains that they'll do fine as long as they stick to the roles he's given them, and he goes on to explain how he gives them the best of luck before leaving Arg's body, and Arg wakes up to see KanjigAAARRR, at which point he proceeds to pulled KanjigAAARRR into. At which point he proceeds to see KanjigAAARRR and rejoins his friends to go and save Jim. At which point everybody except Droll goes through the portal to Killahead Bridge, while KanjigAAARRR retreats into the amulet. And from that point onward, he isn't present in the episode, but he does play an important role in it, in that he's able to get them into the Darklands so that they can save Jim. And of course, with that, then they proceed to start exploring the Darklands, and of course, Toby points out that it's called the Darklands for a reason, and then asks Noam Chomsky if he can show them the way now that they're in the Darklands, and Noam Chomsky chitters and oh yeah, which is funny, but he proceeds to climb off Toby's shoulders and starts exploring the Darklands and leading them to where Jim is because he knows the way, and He's been to Gunmar's fortress. He obviously, in the Darklands, he obviously knows where Gunmar is, and more importantly, where to find Jim. So it's at this point where they proceed to instruct Jim. They then proceed to lead Jim to the Darklands. They proceed to lead everybody through, but they also point out that the terrain is very treacherous and that they're worried that they might trip and fall. And of course, Blinky is climbing around, pointing out that he's very worried something bad will happen. And sure enough, as he says it, he winds up dropping the flare crystal off a cliff because he has Butterfingers. And of course, this is this point where they then proceed, where of course they yell at Blinky, obviously pointing out that he'll die without it and that he needs to go get it. And of course, Blinky is wondering how he's actually supposed to go get it. And it's at this point where he realizes that KanjigAAARRR made sure Arg had a rope, which of course he realizes KanjigAAARRR thought of everything. And then proceeds to instruct Arg to use his rope to hoist them down so they can get the flare crystal. And then he proceeds to instruct the rest of the group to go on without him, and that they'll meet up. At which point, Toby then proceeds to, at which it's at this point where Toby and Claire then proceed to follow Noam Chomsky through the rest of the place, and they exclaim that they're coming, that they're coming to go find Jim, but quickly discover that, and of course they quickly discover that it's, as Claire puts it, it's like an MC Escher painting. It's impossible to find their way through. It's very labyrinthian in a sense. But they do instruct it. But of course, Noam Chomsky continues to chitter that they're going the right way, and he proceeds to lead them to a cliff where they can hide from some gum-gums, which they quickly realize they're probably patrolling, looking for a way out, and they do proceed to instruct, but of course, Noam Chomsky continues to lead them away from the gum-gums and deeper into the place where they're supposed to look. And of course, and meanwhile, Jim and Nomura in their cells are continuing to exchange stories. And Jim proceeds to tell her the story about the time Strickler was invited over for dinner, and they started fighting in the other room while Barbara was preparing food. And she is very amused by the story. And Jim, of course, proceeds to tell her exactly what happened about how he shifted into his changeling form and asked if it was a good look for picture day. And of course, Nomura points out that it's exactly something Strickler would do, pointing out that he's always been a bit theatrical. He points at she points out that he's always kind of acted like that. But does find it amusing that is exactly what happened between the two of them and how they first became enemies. But and of course, at this point where the Gum-Gums proceed to come into the jail cell and proceed to scoop up Nomura with Dictatious instructing her that they've got a very important role for her. But then as Dictatious is leaving, he winds up getting a whisper from one of the Gum-Gums. And he proceeds to follow the Gum-Gum and to where it instructed him. Essentially he's given instructions and he leaves very suddenly. But of course, Jim to kind of pass the time, because now he no longer has somebody to talk to, starts throwing rocks and eventually runs out of them. At which point, Noam Chomsky hands him one. And he is happy that he thanks Noam Chomsky, but then realizes that he's thanking somebody and looks down to see Noam Chomsky bringing him rocks, and is obviously very, confused as to how Noam Chomsky's there. And it's at this point where he hears Toby and Claire calling for him, and he calls back and exclaiming that he's there, where he is, and they do eventually find him, and Toby is, visibly happy that Jim's all right and he's fine. And Jim does respond that he did in fact get their message to keep it crispy, and he's been keeping it crispy, which of course makes Toby happy. But then he and Claire have a bit of a tender moment where they're finally reunited, and she's happy to see him safe and sound for the most part. But obviously he's not been doing great. Obviously they point out that he's not been doing great, but now she's here to get him out. But then they start to wonder how exactly it is they're supposed to get him out of the cage. And they do look at the cage itself. And eventually Claire realizes what exactly it is the tool is supposed to be for. She proceeds to realize that it's a key, and that's supposed to get Jim out of his cell. And of course, she then proceeds to use the tool to kind of jams it into the lock to kind of rotate it, but quickly discovers that that's not working as well as it should be. And eventually they hear that the Gum-Gums are coming, and Noam Chomsky kind of shitters at them that they need to leave. Obviously we don't understand what Chomsky is saying, but also that's exactly what Noam Chomsky is saying, because through context we can kind of figure out what he's saying. Of course they proceed to find a place to hide, but since there's nowhere nearby to hide, they hide in one of the nearby jail cells, which closes behind them, and they're unable to get out. And it's at this point where the Gum-Gums proceed to come for Jim and proceed to pull him out of his cell and proceed to bring him to Gunmar. But Jim tries to make a series of excuses, but the Gum-Gums just kind of drag him away anyway and proceed to drag him to where Gunmar is. And of course, Claire is upset because obviously they're supposed to be the rescue party. They weren't supposed to get stuck in a cell like Jim was. She explains that they're not supposed to be stuck. But of course, Toby points out that the instructions were kind of vague, and he points out that they had no way of knowing that they were going to get stuck in there. But And of course, meanwhile, Blinky and Arg are currently looking around for the flare crystal to try and find it, and do point out that obviously Blinky's upset that KanjigAAARRRGGHH entrusted him something of grave importance, and he immediately loses it because of Butterfingers. So and he asks Arg to help him look around for it, but then Arg sees a light appear out of the darkness and wonders if that's his flare crystal. But of course, he points out that that's obviously not what it is. And of course, it's at this point where the Gums proceed to surround them on all sides. At which point, Blinky hears the voice of his brother calling out that he was always one to panic in a situation like this. And of course, Blinky immediately realizes that it's his brother, and points out that he's dead. They're supposed to be dead. But of course, Dictatious points out that that's the funny thing with them. They were never able to agree on anything, and also asks if he looks dead. And of course he's not. And Blinky is very visibly shocked that his brother is working with Gunmar. Obviously, he first and foremost he realized that Dictatious was supposed to be dead, and he's not. But and we'll get an explanation. We do get an explanation for that, for why Blinky thinks he's dead when he's not. We do eventually get to explain that. But yeah. And meanwhile, Jim is brought forth to the arena, and that's and proceeds to instruct him that if his monsters can't break in, then maybe his friend will, and that he'll need to know himself as well as his enemy. And of course, Jim is all raring to go. He summons his sword to defend himself, and is ready to fight whoever it is that Gunmar is sending after them. But then Bull hesitates when he discovers that he has to fight Nomura to the death, and he doesn't want to. So yeah, that's where the episode ends, with Claire and Toby being stuck in a cage with no way out. Jim having to fight Nomura when he doesn't want to. And Blinky and Arg being in the custody of Dictatious. So overall, that's where the episode ends, and that obviously is going to be the big cliffhanger ending, where, obviously the big revelation is that now Blinky knows that his brother is in fact not dead and is working with Gunmar, which of course is a big problem. Of course, he's probably going to put a strain on their relationship now that he knows. Obviously the second season has been built into that. So obviously, well, technically third season, but obviously the storyline has been building to that about how Blinky would eventually see his brother in the Darklands. So yeah, obviously the story's been building to that being a thing and that big revelation. But now Blinky officially knows. So yeah, that's a problem. But also the episode proceeds to go on to explain. But also this episode establishes that now that everybody's in the Darklands, they have to figure out what exactly the roles are that. They have to finally interpret the rules that KanjigAAARRRGGH gave them, because obviously everything is going belly up. Nothing's going great for any of them. But also, in the episode, Nomura and Jim have officially become friends and are no longer enemies. And now Gunmar's trying to use that against them. So overall kind of a mess going forward. But it is going to obviously be a big part of the storyline going forward. That's obviously going to be where the story is going forward. But any case, that's going to do it for my review of Trollhunters. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion over in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Also, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to help out the channel. I would appreciate all of that. And also be sure to go and check out my Twitch. I stream Saturdays and Sundays. Please go check that out, because I'm trying to get my average viewership up for that. If you absolutely want to support the channel in any way, that's the best way to do that. Go hang out on my Twitch. It's literally just go follow me and then watch the streams when they're live. That's it. That's all you need to do. It's easy. But also go if you want to support me in a more hands-on way. I have my Patreon. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks. That are my way of saying thanks. So yeah, please go check that out. Also, finally, if you want us to go and check out the more things I've done, be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. As next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!